My whole agency runs 150 files that I wrote one time and never had to explain again. And each one took me around 10 minutes to build and required no lines of code. But it's the #1 reason why I'm able to just ask my AI for something and get responses of exactly what I was looking for, or actions that I was looking for as well. So I want you to ask yourself this. Have you ever asked ChatGPT something and then had to explain it twice? Meaning you did something in one day, then the next day you wanted the exact same task, but in order to get that same task, you had to ask again. This is mainly because ChatGPT isn't storing the way that you want these jobs done. So what happens is that you are the one needing to remember how to do these repetitive tasks. And today in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to avoid that. If you're new here, I run an AI agency called Dobot AI, and this entire thing runs on an operating system that I built specifically for my business. In the last video here, I walked through the constitution, which is the way that you're giving your AI context. But context on its own will just sit there. And today we're going to be getting into the layer that actually describes the work to do, and these are called directives. So let's get into it. So let's start with what a directive actually is. Pretty much, a directive is the same thing as a standard operating procedure. In businesses, people use standard operating procedures to describe different tasks or things that need to be done repetitively throughout the business. So if you've ever trained a new hire, you would know that you needed SOPs in order to train this new person. A directive is pretty much the same thing, but we're using it for AI agents. So instead of needing to train an employee, we're going to be training our AI with these specific standard operating procedures of these repetitive tasks that happen throughout our lives and throughout our business. So here, I'll show you an example of a directive of what is inside of my business right now. This is the Instagram and the analytics pull. And what I'm going to explain is just the parts of this entire process. So first, we want to start off with what this workflow is. And pretty much this is a summary of what is actually going on within this directive. So this is the main line that will tell the agent while it's scanning through all of our directives, whether or not it actually wants to use this for the task that we're asking for. So for example, if I were to talk to my operating system and say, hey, I want to pull information from my Instagram, it's going to scan this first section here, realize of exactly what this does because we gave a good summary, and decide if this is the directive that we want to use, if this is the operating procedure that should be called whenever I ask for this specific task. And then the what it does section is very similar to the what this workflow is. So one is just a summary in words, and then the second part is just really the flow of how this works. So then we reach the next part, and this is the prerequisites. So this is everything that this directive needs to have before it can actually run the entire process. So in this case, the Instagram account must be business or creator, and pretty much this is saying that we need access to the API of Instagram. And then the next part is how to run. This is the section where we're going to be calling the executions that I'll talk about in another video. And this is actually how the process is done. So this is within these Python files, this is how the real outcome is created. And then the inputs is just the base information that we need to actually run this directive. And this section here with the quality gates is one of the most important parts of writing a directive, mainly because yes, it could do all the work, but if we don't set true boundaries as to what defines the work as done or the work as well, the AI is just going to start generating files and content that we're not exactly looking for. So we want to make sure that we have quality gates in here to make sure that if this runs, this is the only way that we consider this as correct. So for example, the account row shows the correct username and the follower count. It has to show that. If it doesn't, that means the directive failed and it will have to reiterate on itself. Then of course, as we continue working with the directive, we have a couple edge cases, which sometimes happens. So we want to make sure every time one of those edge case comes up, we list that out in the directive as well. And then lastly, this related directives, we'll talk about this later when we move into the memory video, but this just allows us to pull different directives, and this just lets us bounce off different directives to find related actions. So for example, maybe when we're running the Instagram directive, we also want to do a YouTube analytics pull. Or maybe we want to run the full content analytics report. So it really just gets us in a position where we can do all of it together. So for the next part, what I really want to talk about is just diving a little bit deeper into these quality gates, because it's really important to make sure that we specify these quality gates as something that is direct and doesn't leave enough room for interpretation. So for example, if we were writing a quality gate and we just said something like, make it sound good, we would be completely missing the point, and the AI would have no idea what good sounds like in our perspective. So this would be a bad example of a quality gate. Now, a better example could be less than 500 words. Because this is a very tangible gate, this is something that our quality checks can actually pass through. Another example is be professional. That would be a bad quality gate. A better quality gate would be never mention pricing. We pretty much just want checks that are very tangible and very straightforward, such that an AI can very obviously see that it's crossing the boundary or not. So let's actually go ahead and visualize a run. So I'm here in my Claude Code on my operating system, and what I'll do here is I'm going to purposefully ask a prompt such that we can visualize this a bit better. So the prompt that I'm going to ask for is run my Instagram analytics pull directive and help me visualize so I can see each of the steps as it goes through the directive. Let's go ahead and run this and let's see kind of how this plays out. So you can see here that it's going to look for that directive that I was mentioning. So Instagram analytics pull. It's reading and it found the directive Instagram analytics pull right here. So it was able to check my memory, and this is again something that we'll be talking about later. Just a quick note, the directive ran at 7:05 a.m. via the scheduled job. That's mainly because I have an autonomous run that runs this every single morning. All right, so let's see what happened as well. So the run happened. This is that section right here. So the how to run, it decided to run these two Python scripts. So it went through the prerequisites and what it did. It ran using the Python scripts. So I have a Python execution here. We're gonna talk about that in the next video. That's the actual code of how this process is done. I'll explain how to build that as well. And now when that is finished and it's pulling this execution Instagram analytics, you can see here that every quality gate passed. One thing that stands out, the run captured 100 while the 7:05 scheduled only got 60. So it's gonna check that log just to make sure. And because I asked for that visualization, it's gonna go ahead and craft a visualization for us so we can kind of see on like a dashboard what actually happened from this directive. And just a quick side note that I wanna make, the main thing I wanted to mention here is just how all of these pieces that I'm talking about throughout these videos work together. So if you watched the last video about constitutions, you might realize that all of this is only possible and only working in this exact manner simply because the constitution that I had written allows this agent to work in this way. But real quick before I get going, everything that I'm showing you here, including the exact prompts to build all of this out, is inside lesson 2 of my community AI agent operators, where there are business owners building this exact system into their business right now. And you can find it in the first link below. I'll see you there. So just from running that directive and running this visualization artifact skill, you can see here that the Instagram analytics pull was run. You can see that this was a manual run and this ran on 26/8/13. All gates passed, and we can see like the actual information that was really pulled from my Instagram here. You can see the trend in my followers as well as daily account reach. And let's take a look at the trace as that directive ran. So in this case, it will load the Instagram access token. And what would be really cool is, let me pull up this and we can see like kind of how this works. Under the what it does section, it starts with reads Instagram access token. Here we go. Step 1, read the token. Step 2 is resolve the account. So resolves the account from the token get/me, no page discovery needed. Okay, cool. The account has been resolved and we can see the timestamp of when this step was done. Next, we want to pull the most recent end media. We're defaulting to 100, mainly because I just want the most recent information. You can also see up here, I noticed that we pulled 100 out of the 150 posts because we limited it to 100. And that was mentioned in here as well. We want to default to just 100 people. We can also see that that was inside of inputs, right? The description, the input should be only default 100 media, the most recent end media. And you can kind of see how this really just followed the exact pattern here. So account level daily insights, pull the recent media, per media insights, and then independent append. So each of these steps ran, and this is exactly what this directive should have done. And sure enough, all the captured posts have been added to the content calendar. We could see the dates of the different information that actually went through from my snapshot posts. And overall, we just got some straightforward analytics from this directive run. But notice I didn't have to do any of these connections. I didn't have to ask exactly how I wanted to pull these analytics because I built one file, this directive, that will do it the exact same way every single time. And sure enough, when I move into more autonomous agents, I'm able to call this every single morning. That way the analytics inside of my content calendars are completely updated. Now, there's one last thing that I want to talk about, and this is the idea of when to make a directive. The only time that you really should be making a directive is when the task is repeatable. Now, you might think because I have this operating system, I just make directives for every single thing that I do throughout my day, but it's not entirely true. I don't need a directive to build off this one-off dashboard that I don't need multiple times. I could just do it one time and move on. In fact, adding too many directives will actually dilute and cloud up your operating system. So you want to make sure that it's repeatable. And I guess this is more along the lines of when you're not want to write a directive. And this would be if there's too much change. So if the task is changing every single day, then writing a directive for this wouldn't make much sense. Let's say the job role that you hired an employee for changed literally every single day. Writing an SOP would be completely useless. So now you kind of have an idea of exactly all the pieces of how to build a directive. So remember, you need to make sure that you have all these parts. First, you need the summary. Then you need to have the prerequisites. Then you need to have your executions. And again, we'll talk about this in another video and how to build executions, but these are just the actual Python files that do the work. Remember, directives is just the procedure to do the work. Executions will be the actual doing of the tasks. Then we want to have the inputs. Most importantly, we want to make sure that we have our quality gates or our quality checking. And then edge cases and related directives. This isn't necessary for most early stage directives, but there's no harm in just letting your agent know that you want to have these edge cases tracked the more that you work with it. Because one thing to note, especially for edge cases, again, I didn't start with these edge cases. These edge cases started showing up as I used the agent more. And because of my constitution that had self-annealing, it taught the directive that these mistakes can appear every now and then. So if you're still with me, quick homework, take the tasks that you've already been doing, the repetitive ones. Pick the one that's been taking the most amount of time in your business or your life and just build a directive for it. Build a one-page document that explains exactly how it should run. That way, the next time that you want to run it, instead of explaining yourself every time, you just say, pull my Instagram analytics, draft me a email, upload this to my Google Drive. We want files for every single one. And I guess just a little sneak peek of kind of how my directive folder looks. You can see that I have loads of directives that do different tasks throughout my entire life, throughout my business, throughout my content. So once again, if you want to learn how to build all of these things, including all the prompts and explanations of how to build this, and honestly build out a full operating system that will revolutionize your business, your life, your work, or your schooling, I have the first link down below to my school community. I'd love to see you inside. And as of right now, I'm booking free onboarding calls, as well as a 7-day free trial. So I'd love to see you in those calls. And if you wanted to learn more about AI agents in general, you could check out my full course right here.